A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining today at this panel discussion titled Two States Reading the Jammu and Kashmir and Haryana Verdicts. On 8 October 2024, the results of Jammu and Kashmir and Haryana Assembly elections were announced. These were the first two states to hold elections following the 2024 Indian general elections, where the Bharatiya Janata Party significantly underperformed relative to expectations. In Jammu and Kashmir, these mark the first assembly polls since the abrogation in 2019 of Article 370, which had granted the state special status, and the bifurcation of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories, including Ladakh. The alliance of Jammu and Kashmir National Conference and Congress were victors in Jammu and Kashmir against the BJP, which was contesting on its own. In Haryana, the two-term BJP government beat off anti-incumbency and a challenge from the Congress to win a clear majority. The panelists will provide in-depth analysis of the election results in both states and examine their implications at local and national levels. Today, we are delighted to have with us the following guest speakers. Professor Ashutosh Kumar, Department of Political Science of Punjab University, Chandigarh. Mr. Praveen Swami, National Security Editor at The Print. Dr. Nilanjan Sirkar, Associate Professor at Ahmedabad University, India. And Dr. Neelam Pandey, Senior Associate Editor at The Print. This session will be moderated by Dr. Ronit Roy Sen, Senior Research Fellow and Research Lead of Politics, Society and Governance at the Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore. Today's session will be live streamed on the ISAS Facebook page. I shall now invite Dr. Sen to commence the session. Dr. Sen, please.
Thank you, Mriganika. A very warm welcome to today's panel discussion titled Two States, Reading the Jammu and Kashmir and Haryana Verdicts. The results for the assembly polls in J&K and Haryana, which were in fact the first states to go to elections after the 2024 general elections, were somewhat unexpected. In J&K, elections were held for the first time since abrogation in 2019 of Article 370 and the bifurcation of the state into two union territories. Some had expected a hung assembly. In Haryana, many had believed that the incumbent two-term Bharatiya Janata Party government would be voted out. Neither of the two scenarios played out, with the NC Congress alliance winning fairly comfortably in J&K and the BJP getting a clear majority in Haryana. In J&K, the relatively high voter turnout was seen to be a validation of the democratic process. The NC Congress combined won 49 seats, with the BJP finishing second with 29. The NC, of course, won the lion's share of seats in the alliance with 42 seats, while the Congress won 6. The NC's traditional rival, the PDP or the People's Democratic Party, was decimated, winning only 3 seats. Most of the newer political outfits, such as Engineer Rashid's, AIP, former Congress leader Ghulam Nabi Azad's, DPAP, all of them performed poorly. Some of them could not even open their account. There was a divergence in the vote between the Muslim-majority Kashmir Valley and the Hindu-dominated Jammu region. The NC won a majority of its seats from the Kashmir Valley and the 16 Muslim-majority seats in Jammu, while the BJP swept the Hindu-majority seats in Jammu. Of the two central parties, the BJP and Congress, the BJP, of course, did far better. In fact, the BJP won the highest overall vote share, 26%, compared to the NC's 23%. However, the BJP contested only 62 of the 90 seats, choosing not to field candidates in 28 of the 47 seats in the valley. In effect, the BJP swept the 27 Hindu-majority constituencies, winning 24 of these. In contrast, the Congress performed poorly, winning 12% of the overall vote share, down 6% from 2014. The CSCS Lokniti survey, and we'll be talking a little bit about surveys and exit polls in the course of the discussion, provides some pointers to understanding the J&K result. According to the survey, the two main issues for voters, besides unemployment, were restoration of statehood for J&K and Article 370. Both these issues were played up by the Congress-NC combined. The NC-Congress alliance also benefited from projecting Omar Abdul as its chief ministerial candidate, since he seemed to have been the most popular choice for chief minister. In contrast, the PDP, the traditional rivals of the NCP, their voters seem to have deserted it, with the party winning 9% of the vote, down a whopping 14% from 2014, when assembly elections were last held. The PDP's past alliance with the BJP seems to have badly dented its support base. In Haryana, despite the BJP and Congress getting almost the same vote share, roughly around 39%, the BJP ended up winning 48 to the Congress's 37 seats in the 90-member assembly. The primary reasons for the BJP's convincing victory, again, according to the CSDS Lokniti survey, were the following. In first, although there was much talk about anti-incumbency, the survey in fact found that nearly 60% of the respondents were quite happy with the incumbent BJP. Second, the replacement of Manohar Lal Khattar as chief minister by Naib Singh Saini before the 2024 general elections seems to have worked. Third, the Congress consolidation of Jat vote, and the Jats constitute roughly a quarter of Haryana's population, and the projection of Bhupinder Singh Hooda as chief minister did not seem to have paid off. Finally, the Congress was hamstrung by infighting. That's often a part of the story with the Congress elsewhere too. The spat between Hooda and Kumari Selja, Dalit leader, was in the open and seemed to have impacted the party's performance. And finally, the Congress's failure to tie up with its India allies, particularly the Aam Aadmi Party, might also have had an impact in some constituencies where the winning margins were extremely narrow. So with that, let me now turn to Ashutosh to deconstruct the Haryana verdict. I've switched or shuffled the lineup a little bit. So we'll go with Ashutosh first, and then next Neelam, followed by Nilanjan, and finally Praveen. So it's over to you, Ashutosh.
Right. I have 15 minutes now, 10 to
10 to 12 minutes,
right?
10 to 12 would be, ideal.
10 to 12 minutes.
Yeah, since there are 4 of you. Thanks.
First thing, I was also surprised as a student of electoral politics. I was most surprised by the verdict. But now I can make sense of it, and I learned a great lesson from this verdict. One thing, when we talk about let us talk in cricketing terms. If you take the Indian cricket team and the New Zealand cricket team, like yesterday, the test match is going on, Indian cricket team would always start with an advantage, right? Indian cricket team. So whenever there is an election anywhere in India, even if it's like the third time anti-incumbency factor is there, BJP always starts with an advantage. BJP starts with an advantage in any election, even if it is fighting for the third term of its citizens, because of its organizational support, because of its a popular face in the form of Modi, because of it being in the government. So BJP has learned this trick, that how to remain in power or how to win the election and then another term. So that is a factor. Another thing which is also very important in case of Haryana verdict, which we should learn, is that BJP is not just another right-wing party. BJP is a right-wing party with a solid support of RSS. My students, we have the students from Haryana also. I was not involved in CSDS survey, but they tell me that RSS workers this time did campaign for BJP candidates, though they were not being identified clearly with the BJP workers. They were campaigning on their own, but they were helping out the BJP candidates. So these are the factors, like you have a large army of the volunteers. You have the huge human and material resources at your command. You have a popular leader, and you have the advantages of being in the government. So when we talk about anti-incumbency, as Rononja was talking about, anti-incumbency really doesn't work. Now this is favorable factor. If you are in power, you are more likely to remain in power than the opposition party. Because when you are in power and you go for freebies and you ensure the effective delivery of the services and all those schemes, freebies, we talk about welfare schemes and all, and if the delivery of the services and the public resources are effective, then you are always in an advantageous position. So I learned this lesson from Haryana verdict, that now in the concrete reality of India is that if you are in power, you are more likely to remain in power rather than not being in power, provided you make tall promises and you have fulfilled some of the promises, and also that people have more confidence in you, that you would fulfill those promises rather than the opposition party. For example, in the campaigning, some of our students were there. One of my PhD student is closely related to a candidate who was fighting election, and she said that when she was going for door-to-door campaign, people said that Modi ne ye diya hai, or Modi would continue to provide us. So we are going to vote for Modi. We are not going to vote for BJP. So unlike the popular narrative in the media that Modi was factor didn't work, or the Modi was not a factor, Modi did only 4 rallies and Modi photo was small in the poster and all those narrative you are reading in the newspaper. But in reality, Modi factor did work, right? So this is the first observation I would like to make, that what really happened in Haryana. Second factor, that we talked about, like Rononja also said, Jats constituting 27% of the population. But if you see the demography, and in Haryana, just like Haryana is just exceptionalism of Haryana we talked about. Obviously, every state is exceptional, and every state is a mini democracy, as Rob Jenkins said famously, 2004 book. Every state has its own exceptionality, but one common factor in almost every state is caste factor. We saw that in Karnataka also. We would see that in Maharashtra also. So what is the caste composition? If the Jats are 27% and they qualify the dominant caste, if you remember M.N. Srinivas, just like Jats in Punjab, the Jats are land-owning, they are numerically powerful, and they are not in the low in the caste hierarchy. They are middling caste, middle peasant caste, and they are not OBC, though they demanded OBC status in 2015, right? But they are dominant caste, and they are no way they would be considered as a backward caste by no imagination. So, but then the Jats consolidation, everybody thought that Huda, and I think Rononja also spoke, Huda is seen as a powerful Jat leader, right? Huda, when he was a chief minister of Haryana 10 years, it was like the Jat domination. The Jats would be the preeminent community in Haryana, whether it's a university appointment, is the government appointment. It's just like you go to a, what is the litmus test of being a dominant caste? You go to a police station and they ask you, the first thing the police officer would ask you a caste in a rural area. And if you say you are a Jat, you start with an advantage in Haryana. It was like this, right? You remember 2015, what happened? Khattar could do nothing, for 2-3 this GT, lots of things happened. Nothing happened to those perpetrator of the violence. That tells you about the dominance of the community. So 2 factors. In the newspaper, you might have heard, and in the paper, in the survey also, it has come that Jats would, right. There we must understand that Dalits comprise of 20% of the Haryana population, 2011 census. The backward caste comprise of 34.9%, 1931 other census le lo, and Hindu Jats comprise of 27%. As far as the other communities are concerned, like the Sikh or the Sikh community or other communities, they are, religious minority, Sikhs and Christians, they are less than 1%. So, but Muslims are in sizable number, and Muslims are in sizable number in the Mewat area, Meo Muslims, right? And there again, you have Meo Muslims, many of the Meo Muslims, one of my students did PhD on Meo Muslims, they identify themselves as Rajputs, that Rajputs converted to Islam. So lots of their customs, traditions are very much like the fellow Rajput community. Though now they have this Deoband Samaj and all those radicalization is taking place in those areas also. And what fuels this thing is the economic backwardness of Mewat region. Another thing, so Here, I would come to this Jat factor. The Jats are divided into the Gotras. And this Huda belongs to the Deswal Gotra. Deswal Gotra. But other Gotras not necessarily follow Jats. So to say that Jats would always vote for Jats just because they want their own Chaudhar. Chaudhar, you understand? The dominance of the जिसको क्या कहते हैं वहाँ हमारे wrong word. I mean, it's all the time. Though overwhelmingly Jats voted for Congress party, they voted for the Congress party because of the many factors. It was not only because of the Huda. So now Huda is being crucified, but there were other factors also. Modi is being seen as an anti-farmer. And when you say anti-farmer, it's basically a land-owning farmers. And the Jats are the landowners. So Modi, that's why it was a smart move on the part of Narendra Modi ji, Prime Minister Sahib, not to be very prominent in the during the campaign, or not to ask the vote in the name of Prime Minister Modi. That was, the grand narrative was not like about Modi. Unlike the 2019, that you vote for Modi or you vote for the this thing. As for another point, quickly, because only 10 minutes are there, Khattar. Khattar, if you refer to Khattar, I've written also in the newspaper that it was not a right strategy. To say that Khattar was the factor and replacing Khattar was good. I mean, of course it helped because Naib Saini is a OBC, and as I said, that the 35% of the population belongs to the backward caste, and also somehow you can have the kind of common identification with the OBCs and the Dalits, and Kumari Shalja factor was very much there, and some of the statements like Jayaprakash making the statement that Huda would become the chief minister, or Huda and his son Dipinder Page, and as the media reports say, and I heard it from a politician also, that Huda gave 72 tickets. You know, the 72 Congress candidates were the Huda candidate. Another factor that I've been told by made promises to many candidates that you would get the ticket of Congress. And then ultimately what happens that you can give only one ticket to a candidate from one constituency. So what happened was that there was too many claimants for the Congress ticket because it was being under and some of the candidates who knew that they were going to vote, but then even then they were not going to win. Even then they were allowed to continue, and there I think BJP resources came handy. So that would be the third factor. That Jats not voting as just the Jat community. You cannot essentialize Jat as a voting community. There are Gotras, there are regions, and another factor which I said, independent candidates from the Congress. So in fighting, but the problem of also Huda, that promising so many candidates that you would get the ticket, and ultimately everyone didn't get the ticket, so they continued to fight. Another factor which would be also important would be the satellite character of Haryana. Satellite character of Haryana means Haryana being, I'm remembering D.L. Seth, Professor D.L. Seth. He always used to say that Haryana has got a satellite character. You know, he would say Madhya Pradesh is a leftover state and Haryana has a satellite economy. So Haryana having the proximity of Delhi and the NCR region and all, Haryana people are pragmatic people. You know, in Haryana, you don't have a clear-cut commitment for any party, right? You saw in the case of INLD and JJP, what happened to the so-called Jat party and Devilal family. So that is something which is important, that Haryanvis know. As far as the Dalits are concerned, poor people know that their welfare schemes would continue to be delivered when Modi is there and the BJP is there. They don't have that trust in the Huda government. And this is a Khattar factor, I just wanted to say, this Kharchi and Parchi. Khattar government, the main feature of Khattar government was that it was not seen as a government of any community. You talked about 36 community. So Khattar government was not a Jat government. It was not a non-Jat government. And our students got the job. Earlier, what was happening was that it was not enough to give the bribe. It was also essential that you belong to the Jat community to get a government job in Haryana. That was a popular perception. That may be wrong, but that was the perception that Kharchi and Parchi would be only for the person of a particular community for the key position, the SHO and all. In Khattar government, that perception was not there. So whatever the appointment happened, unemployment was a big issue, but whatever the employment happened in a fair manner. So give credit to Khattar also. Khattar did play a role. Khattar government was that way helpful. Thank you. I've been said that the time is up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ashutosh, for that very comprehensive analysis of the Haryana results. Could we now switch to Jammu and Kashmir and request Neelam to speak about the result based on her reportage and travels during the Jammu and Kashmir campaign? Please, Neelam, floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. So I would like to start this, this discussion with something that a political analyst told me in Jammu and Kashmir. I was researching on Jamaat, and I had, sought help from Praveen also. And while talking about the impact Jamaat backed candidates would have, he said, all said and done, it is very difficult to read a Kashmiri's mind. So having said that, I realized that the same Kashmiris who had voted out Omar Abdullah barely few months back have now reposed faith in him and in his party. And one of the most significant moments, I would say, of Jammu and Kashmir elections for both NC as well as Omar Abdullah would be, when he held out his signature Sozni cap and during a campaign rally, and he said, today I will say one thing: my turban, my honor, it all is in your hands. And everyone said that that moment did sort of define in a way his career and the change that took place in the politics as well as personality of Omar. So from there onwards, we see, the major shift I mean, as far as political analysts and I also found in Omar was that he was talking more in Urdu, he was talking in Kashmiri, he was trying to act as someone who was one of their own. And during these campaigns, I attended rallies by Jamaat-backed candidates. I also attended the first rally of engineer Rashid after he was released from Tihar jail. And the difference between this rally and the one which was done by his son when he was lodged in Tihar jail, his son Abrar, you could see that there was a certain level of spontaneity when it happened during the Lok Sabha election, something which was missing now. This entire question about is he a BJP's proxy candidate, are Jamaat candidates proxy candidates, this is something that Omar Abdullah, even PDP leaders, Mehbooba Mufti, Iltija, Farooq Abdullah, they managed to somehow put that thought in people's mind that, why is he out of jail at this juncture? Why all these candidates, they are making such remarks, and let's say UAPA is not being slapped against them. If a normal Kashmiri is to make those remarks, they will be put behind bars. So I would say that NC managed to put that thought in people's mind. So since the beginning, while there was some momentum for NC when we interacted with people, but the kind of verdict that has come, I believe that the kind of campaign that NC and Omar Abdullah sort of shaped towards the end, that is what helped them. At the same time, focused on Article 370. Both PGP and NC had mentioned in their manifesto that they will do away with Article 370. And a lot of people felt that, this is something only the center can do, and they're making a mistake by including this in their manifesto because nothing can happen from the level of the UT or even from the level of a state. So why have they included it? But this resonated. When I spoke to people, they did mention Article 370 as one of the key areas and one of the key issues that they had, because they felt that it was linked to their identity. But at the same time, despite Article 370 and statehood emerging as one of the major election issues, issues related to roads, electricity, for instance, is something that emerged as a very, very big issue in Jammu and Kashmir, and NC had mentioned it in their manifestos. Employment, of course, because the youth obviously is looking for jobs. When you have after the abrogation of Article 370, we are talking about the stone pelting has come down. The Lieutenant Governor is talking about the development that is taking place. One of the key issues that the youth spoke about was employment opportunities, just like in other states or in union territories. People don't need to venture out of their state. That is something that should be there in Kashmir also. Youngsters languishing in jails. Again, this is something that was being highlighted by all political parties. And this also had an impact because right from every family, I mean, whoever I interacted with would have someone or some story to narrate about their family members languishing in jail. So that again is something that worked against the BJP. So of course, in Kashmir, in the Kashmir region, BJP was not hoping to do well at all. I mean, I've had discussions with BJP leaders, and they were not quite confident, but they were hoping that the independent candidates, and this time we saw around over 350 odd independent candidates. I think this is the highest since 2008. 2008 was the highest number of independent candidates that Jammu and Kashmir had. This time was the second highest, and they were hoping that the 10 Jamaat-backed candidates, Engineer Rashid's party, Apni party, that these candidates will be able to eat into the vote share of NC or PDP. And if even 5 or 10 will emerge victorious, they will be able to form the government. Again, this is something that this narrative in Kashmir region was quite, it was quite prominent. People felt that Engineer Rashid and Jamaat-backed candidates, why have they decided to contest the election at this juncture itself? And which is why many felt that if they would vote for these candidates, they will give a backdoor entry to the BJP. This is also the reason that PDP suffered a setback, because this entire narrative of they got the BJP into Kashmir managed to stick, and people felt that they had betrayed them. At the same time, unlike the NC, where you could see that all the leaders were talking in one voice, even Congress was not really focused on Kashmir region. They were asked to concentrate on Jammu. Even in our interviews, when I had asked who would be the chief minister to Farooq Abdullah, he said that is something we will decide later. So they were trying their best not to leave any issues which could snowball into a controversy. PDP campaign, I felt it was not visible on ground, apart from Iltija Mufti, who was contesting from Bijbehara, or let's say Wahid Para, who managed to win, but there was a difference in his victory because whoever I interacted with, they said they were voting for him as an individual and not as someone who's a PDP candidate. So he had his personal rapport, and because of that, he was able to win the Pulwama seat. He is also someone who had been slapped with UAPA, and this is something that he spoke about in his rallies, in his speeches, and he focused on door-to-door approach as far as his campaign is concerned. For as far as Omar Abdullah is concerned, many people said that their anger, which was there towards the NC or Omar Abdullah specific, for not doing much when the abrogation of Article 2019 happened, they felt that anger, they had released it during the Lok Sabha elections, and hence they were now willing to give him a chance. Of course, during that time, when I was covering it, it was not very clear that they will get this kind of majority, but it did appear that they were quite ahead. As far as Engineer Rashid is concerned, again, his victory in Lok Sabha election, I would say had many factors to it, whether it was emotional, the fact that he was still lodged inside the jail, the fact that he was raising questions about UAPA, how the BJP had wronged him. But at the same time, when it came to the assembly elections, people were wondering that, these candidates whom he had fielded, he did not get enough time to choose suitable candidates. So he fielded around 36 odd candidates. Some of them were earlier working as teachers, some of them were working as government officers, and they obviously left those professions, and then they decided to contest election. But I would say that they did not get adequate time for their campaign. So apart from his brother and one or more two seats, even Engineer Rashid was not able to campaign for all of his candidates. The Jamaat candidates, there were 10 candidates who were backed by Jamaat. I had attended the rallies of 3 or 4, including Sayar Reshi. Sayar Reshi is the only one I had felt would do well. And if you look at the result, he did manage to get around 25,000 votes. And he was pitted against Tariq Ami, of course, who emerged victorious. But apart from Sayar Reshi, who earlier, obviously, he also was able to get that kind of support because he was earlier working as a teacher when he was associated with the Jamaat-e-Islami, and people saw him as a young face who had done a lot in terms of educational areas, and they were willing to give him a chance. But apart from him, all the other Jamaat candidates that I met, most of them were busy giving interviews, but I did not see them venture out of their homes or go door to door or do campaign. For instance, Talat Majid, I met him and I did the interview, and when I asked him when will you be campaigning, and this is barely like 6 days before elections, and he said, I am in touch with my team and we will devise some plan or the other. So I think even for these candidates, in their mind, it was quite clear that their decision to contest elections was more a tactical one. It was probably the organization trying to shed that image that, we are not separatists, we are not against India. And the fact that we are contesting election is because we want to be with the, we want to believe in the Constitution of India and we want to adhere to the Constitution of India. So it was more a tactical decision. They were not contesting elections to, in fact, create a dent or emerge as a kingmaker, so to speak. PDP, on the other hand, whenever I had interacted with them, they felt, going by their previous record, they felt that they will emerge as a kingmaker. But this time round, one of the differences that we saw was that people were very clear that they had to choose one. They could not let their vote get split, and which is why the choice was clear. Either you choose NC or you choose PDP. And if you look at what all happened with PDP since the abrogation of Article 370, the leadership, the kind of leaders who were there deserted them. Funds became an issue. At the same time, the party was also not able to answer why did they ally with the BJP. So all these factors had a lot of played a significant role in the Jammu and Kashmir verdict. And as I said, that though it did appear there was a momentum for the national conference initially, but I believe that over the period of time, the fact that Engineer Rashid's bail got prolonged, and the fact that the Jamaat candidates, people felt that there was no decision that had actually come from the real Jamaat leaders that did manage to play a role.
Thank you, Neelam, for that survey of Jammu and Kashmir, the result, as well as your experiences during the campaign. May I now request Nilanjan to step in and decipher, why the Congress seemed to have been so sure of victory to the extent of blaming the EVMs after the results, and why did the exit polls, of course, this is a repeat after the 2024 general elections, why did the exit polls, almost all of them, get it so wrong? I know you've spoken on this issue yesterday, at another panel discussion. So this must be quite fresh in your mind. So please, Nilanjan, go ahead.
Are you able to see my slides?
Yeah, we can see your slide.
Yes?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, good. So thank you for having me. It's great to be back. I think, as a sort of preface, I think everybody was surprised by what happened in Haryana, including people on the ground, the Congress party certainly, but even the BJP. Talk to the guys in the BJP. They didn't. I think their internal polling did not have this happening. So one of the challenges we face when we're talking about what happened in Haryana is that there's going to be a lot of ex post rationalization. The RSS was present. Is it more present than normal? Not obviously. Was there a Jat, non-Jat divide? Certainly. Is that something that is unusual for Haryana politics? No. Right? So whatever seems to have happened, a very large number of people missed the scale of what happened. I do not believe the EVMs were tampered with. I do believe this was a legitimate result. I think what I'm going to try to do is talk a little bit about, try to be a little precise about where a lot of people got the prediction wrong, spatially. And then actually a slightly technical discussion about how exit polls can get wrong and how it is particularly, and qualitative researchers, and how it particularly bites in this particular election, why we may have gotten things. Now, I did spend some time in Haryana, but I wasn't actually there to do election field work, so I don't want to overclaim from a field perspective, but let me just sort of talk a little bit about, covering some material, but I think it helps us understand where things went wrong when you look at the map. So we know that the post-2019 period was a period of very significant social change and political change and changing of political preferences in Haryana, right? So significant mobilization among the Jat community due to the farmers' protests, due to the wrestlers' protests, and so on and so forth. High rates of joblessness, rural distress, particularly in a place like Haryana. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, a sort of a reimagination of Jat and Dalit politics, right? So it is not natural in Haryana politics or in North Indian politics in general for the Jat community and Dalit communities to go in the same direction. It is something we saw in the 2024 election, right? So the question was that, were they disparate reasons, or is that a coalition that could hold coming into 2020? Okay. So when one looks at the initial map in 2019, right, when the BJP formed government along with the JJP led by Dushyant Chautala. So this dark green, these are maps that were made by Decoder, sort of an online site, but others have these kinds of maps. You can see kind of where the BJP had been doing well, it's in saffron color, and where the JJP, where there's a large Jat population, had done. The two, saffron and dark green together, formed government, right? So JJP and the BJP together. And this is kind of the area just south of Delhi. We've got Gurgaon, Faridabad here, right? And so this is sort of what we sort of imagined as a core sort of vote bank for the BJP. And a lot of these areas are Jat-dominated areas, which is why the JJP was doing well. The Shantapala is the great of the Iran, right? What we see is in the Jat agitation, the JJP is actually completely decimated. And so much so that in this election, Dushyant Chautala, obviously an important figure among the Jat community, finishes 5th in his own seat. When we go to the 2024 election, right, what we see when we break down the data by assembly segment, this entire Jat belt is gone, other than a few seats here and there, right? It's gone to the Congress. On this side, actually, near Karnal and so on, you actually see the BJP coming back. And again, this sort of core area, this sort of south of Delhi, that is sort of remaining. So we know that at the parliamentary constituency level, it was about a 50-50 draw. In terms of assembly segments, the BJP had won, I think, 44, and the Congress won 42, and the other 4 are Aam Aadmi Party in yellow here. So when we look at the map thereafter, you can see exactly where the exit polls go. Right? The exit polls kind of assumed we would see a continuation of this, right? And maybe a couple more seats going towards the Congress and some diminishing for the BJP. But this belt, where the BJP had once held, right? That is exactly where the Congress seems to have come at. We know there's a large Jat community here. We know that this is Bharatiya Janata an independent seat winning candidate who has now joined the BJP, winning in this city. But this change is what the exit polls and pretty much everybody on the ground seem to have missed. Okay? So let me talk a little bit about what was in the exit poll and why it may have gone wrong. So beyond anger in the Jat community, the exit polls had picked up that the Dalit communities would continue to shift towards the Congress party in the 2024 national election because of concerns that the BJP may want to change the constitution. All across Dalit belts in Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana, you saw a large-scale shift towards the Congress. This time, anybody who spent time on the ground did see some of that sentiment among the Jata community, although there was the BSP voter as well. But among the Valmiki community, the other sort of Dalit community, you didn't actually hear that. And perhaps people just simply got the percentages wrong. There are other communities in these belts, right, beyond the Jat community, and perhaps when you add everything together, the shift back towards the BJP was just enough, and that seems to be something that. So just very quickly on how exit polls may wrong, it's not a technical talk, but I want to give you a little schematic of how things can be. Here's a schematic of 12 voters, 2 caste groups of equal size, caste group A. And I've broken respondents into 4 categories. Responsive, people who are easy to find, they'll always give you an answer for who they're voting for. Hesitant, they're harder to get consent, but they'll always give you what the answers. And non-responsive, people who simply won't consent, people who won't talk to you. Right? So in this population, it is true that 58% of people are voting for BJP because non-responsive people will never tell you what's happening. And in this population, I have the non-responsive being more Congress, the responsive being more BJP. The best you can ever do is about 75% voting for BJP, which is this population, right? The people who are responsive or hesitant. Now, what I want to show you is that the poll method that is being used for exit polls and the method that's even being used by CSDS actually induces biases. So there's a reason why they've been systematically getting it wrong over the last 7 elections. In exit polls, what they say is, well, because half of the population is from caste group A, half the population is from caste group B, what you should do is get exactly 3 people from A and 3 people from B. The problem is it's the most responsive people that you actually get first. And what you end up predicting is that 100% of A and 67% of B are going to vote for BJP. You actually get this number right, but you get this number very wrong because the responsive people are answering first. And so you predict too high a vote share for BJP. In the CSDS method, you say, okay, they say they give you 40 names randomly and they say pick 25. Now, the problem there, again, is that you're more likely to pick up the responsive people. And it is the hesitant population that you have a harder time getting. And again, you get a little bit better with the BJP, but you overestimate how much population B is going to vote for BJP. And again, you get the wrong vote share. So even among people who you could speak to, if you had predicted a certain value for the BJP, you would end up over predicting how strong the BJP is in this example. You can flip the logic. The problem is this hesitant group, and we don't have either in qualitative work or exit polls an intelligent way of thinking about these hesitant groups, right? So there's very little evidence, actually, that we have non-response, but there's very little thinking about how to reach hesitant people consistently. In an area where Jat populations are dominant, Dalits are subaltern, less dominant, it is natural that a large number of Dalit voters might be hesitant. You might assume that Dalit voters are going to continue voting for the Congress, but in fact, if that dynamic no longer holds, you'll be in trouble. The only sort of final thing, I have a lot of points here, I want to go over them. The only sort of final point I'll make here is that in a lot of people's statements, even in survey data, there are a lot of claims being made about subpopulations, about Jat, Dalit, so on and so forth. And I just want to be clear that there is very little statistical basis when we're seeing the quality of the exit polls right now to be making claims like that in any sort of declarative fashion. This is, something I've talked about before, but we need to be careful when we're talking about exit polls and breaking into subpopulations, because right now, quite honestly, the sampling quality is not there to be able to win those claims. Let me see.
Thank you, Nilanjan, for being very succinct as well as keeping to the time and noting some of the issues with exit polls that led to the overestimation of the Congress's vote share. May I now finally request Praveen to dwell on the larger picture in Kashmir and what the current results mean, based not only on his reportage. I know Praveen was there during the campaign, but also based on his years of studying this region, particularly issues around militancy. So, Praveen, the floor is yours.
First of all, Ranajoy, no thanks to you for saying I'm old. But yes, I think what makes Jammu and Kashmir and has made Jammu and Kashmir unique among all Indian elections is not the complexity of its politics or its, undoubtedly rich sort of configuration of communities and competing power groups. But the fact that ethnic nationalism and communal or religious identity have from the outset set the stage, if you like, for politics in the state. Even though Jammu and Kashmir is often characterized as a place of special ethno-nationalist identity or special characteristics, it's more shaped by pan-India currents and forces than we sometimes acknowledge. There's a wonderful passage in Aatesh-e-Chinar, the biography, the semi-autobiography of Kashmir's political founding patriarch, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, where he's asked in 1953 why he started this whole independence plebiscite thing up again, which was by then thought to be settled business. And he replies in a very poignant passage that, look, I used to visit Alwar and Bharatpur in Rajasthan before independence. I had a lot of friends there. And now I see after partition that there is not a single Muslim there. He said, in our heart, Kashmiris fear that the same fate lies ahead for us too. Now, why was this election important? Why was Article 370 important in the first place? As those of you who followed Kashmir's often tangled course will know, the essence or the substance of Kashmir's special constitutional status was for all practical purposes gutted by 1975, when Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Sheikh Abdullah signed an agreement called the Delhi Agreement, which conceded to the union government very wide-ranging powers. And those powers were used to bring Indian law, or to bring Jammu and Kashmir's laws, broadly in line with Indian laws on virtually every conceivable subject. By the time Article 370 was abrogated, there was hardly an issue of consequence on which Indian law was at odds with the prevailing legislation in Jammu and Kashmir, certainly not on anything of substance. And what remained was a kind of totemic or metaphorical autonomy on things like having a separate state flag or various kinds of displays of identity. But I think its a real importance was as a signifier of the Indian Republic's commitment to allow this tiny enclave, Muslim majority enclave, to maintain its special Muslim majority character. And in Jammu, similarly, the force of Hindu nationalism has always been very intense. There is a large and voluminous literature on the impact of partition and the savageries of partition in Punjab. There is sadly a very thin literature on the equally horrific, if not more horrific, carnage which happened in Poonch, in Mirpur, in the regions, and in Jammu city itself. Where again, like in Punjab, often the forces of the Dogra monarchy on the one side and demobilized Indian National Army soldiers on the other side turned the massacres of partition into an almost organized military enterprise. In fact, that violence preceded the violence of the war of 1947-1948 between India and Pakistan and was one of its proximate causes. My point here is that in Jammu as well, existential fears about what the Muslim majority to the north and Pakistan perched on the borders may mean are very, very intense. At various elections in the past, we've seen this manifest itself into very strange political alliances. Leading into the 1977 elections, for example, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's government had a not so tacit, in the 1973 elections, had a not so tacit alliance with the Jamaat-e-Islami party, which Neelam wonderfully described and reported on from Kashmir. And in 1977, you had the bizarre spectacle of the Jamaat-e-Islami allying with the Janata Party, Bharatiya Janata Party, to fight elections. In fact, Morarji Desai, in one of those wonderful, colorful things that happens in elections, visited the Mirwais Manzil ahead of his election. The Mirwais Manzil being the home of Srinagar's leading cleric, Mirwais Mohammad Farooq. And women there burst into a song which roughly translate means, behold his green turban, which God loves. The Ghazi from Pakistan is welcome in our homes. And I've always wondered what poor Gandhi and Morarji would have thought of being called a Ghazi from Pakistan. But these odd alliances have taken place, all sort of around these poles of religious ethnic identity. Now, where do we stand now? I think a couple of takeaways are key. And the first is that both regions of Jammu and Kashmir, as Rana Joy told us early on, have voted for what they think was the preeminent party that could best defend their communal interests. In Kashmir, the National Conference, with this small sort of contribution from the Congress, has for all practical purposes swept the election, and even other political parties of Kashmiri identity, like the People's Democratic Party, were cast aside as the vote consolidated around what seemed to be the winning platform of Kashmiri identity. And in Jammu, the vote similarly consolidated around the Bharatiya Janata Party, whatever the many resentments people may have had with the arrogance of bureaucrats or the failings of the local bureaucracy and of local politicians. So the communal interest has first and foremost been defended. And I should point out that this has happened periodically in the past. The course of recent Kashmiri politics has often invoked these very sort of tropes of identity. 2008, terrible violence across the state over the grant of a land lease to the Amarnath temple pitted the two regions apart. These wounds have not really healed and are accelerating. And I think we need to consider the ways in which electoral politics are working to consolidate or cement some of those divisive tendencies. The second thing that's also clear to me is that Article 370 in itself is not a significant issue to Kashmir's young people, or even perhaps its older ones, because Kashmiris better than everyone know that this sort of constitutional provision, this alleged, totemic defender of Kashmir status, is actually quite a irrelevant thing in real practice. Kashmiri secessionists, who constitute a part of the constituency, and I leave it to opinion poll experts to give a sense of what that constituency is. Kashmiri secessionists have never held Article 370 or autonomy very dear. Nobody ever became a jihadist or even a secessionist politician to fight for greater autonomy for the state. The National Conference issued a report asking for greater autonomy, which sank without a trace, and in fact did not lead to the re-election of the National Conference, but saw the PDP rise to power for the first time. This is a non-issue. I mean, I looked through the reams of media reportage saying that there would be widespread violence after 370 was abrogated. And this wonderful Kashmiri journalist, Ahmad Ali Fayaz, Neelam, of course, also knows him, said, not even a dog is going to die. And that was maybe a little exaggerated, but pretty much the truth of it. What we don't have, though, is resolution on the protection of Kashmiri identity and the protection of Kashmir from protection of the democratic rights and the aspirations of young people in Kashmir. Now, like everywhere else in the rest of India, the Kashmiri village today is characterized by a very large cohort of young people with no semblance of employment or prospects. That's, of course, true of Tamil Nadu. That's true of the Northeast. But in Kashmir, it has the a sort of destabilizing potential. We've seen from 2003 onwards that youth mobilizations, which then transformed very quickly into these peasant jacqueries almost, succeeded in eroding and cracking open the entire edifice of the democratic polity and faith in democracy. And I think that is still a very real prospect, unless democracy is allowed to consolidate itself. That brings me to my second concluding point, which is that from the 1950s, Delhi has constantly sought to micromanage Kashmir's politics, to invent new kinds of political forces, to manage the threat of violence and insurgency. And that has meant that the political and party system there are extremely fragile and discredited. And I hope that mistake will not be made again. And I'll end with one final point, that the threat of violence from across the border, though massively mitigated, not just now, but since 2003, still exists. We've seen small numbers of violent incidents on the Pir Panjal, and some of the simmering sort of issues that we've seen in these elections, which are to do with reservations, with communities like the Gujar Bakarwal, who feel that their entitlements have been stolen, with ethnic Kashmiri Muslims who feel that there isn't space in the open quota. Many of these things are have the potential to destabilize and change the polity if you don't have a political system that can address them. Judging by the central government's track record, I think its instincts are to seek confrontation with the state government rather than to collaborate. We've seen some of the outcomes of that in Delhi and even in Karnataka with all these cases and so on and so forth. I can only hope that some wisdom will prevail, and not just a few years, but 70 years of micromanaging, directing Kashmiri politics will end and things will be allowed to take their own course. I wrote recently that if you want Kashmir to be like just another state of India, it's time to start treating it maybe like just another state of India. And I hope that will fall on receptive ears. I doubt it, but I hope that. Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you.
Thank you, Praveen, for that very rich overview of Kashmir, and going back to certain historical facts that I think many of us, as well as probably many in the audience, wouldn't have been aware of. So before I go into a discussion section, Could I request members of the audience to send in their questions through the Q&A mode? They could also, I guess, do so through the chat mode, but I think the Q&A option is preferable. And I don't see any questions yet, so I'll maybe just ask a few questions to each of the presenters. Of course, the others are very welcome to chip in. One of the things that Ashutosh, you mentioned in your brief presentation struck me. One was that you mentioned how incumbency is an advantage. You made the point, of course, about Haryana, but you were sort of saying that it's generalizable. Do you think this incumbency being an advantage is a sort of post-2000 phenomenon, or do you think that's always been so, or what are your thoughts on that? I think you need to unmute yourself.
No, it is not that anti-incumbency is a factor. I think I remember reading Pranay Roy book. That is book. He says that anti-incumbency, the term has been invented in India, in the Indian election studies, which is very much India's invention. But incumbency becomes an advantage in certain cases, and especially as you are right. I mean, if you see the Modi era, anti-incumbency was a factor which was very much prevalent in the late 90s, and now you can see that many government, like you saw that in Madhya Pradesh also, that if the government is delivering direct transfer of public resources and the services, which is happening, the new model of welfare, that there is a much emphasis on direct transfer. And if your government is effective in delivering that, then and India remains largely poor even now. Even the below poverty line is more than 27% by the government of India figure. So then naturally you have in Haryana, I think I've been told by many students of mine that the Dalits, which you say that they voted not on the basis of caste, they voted on the promise that those welfare schemes would continue in Modi's era. They were not thinking of Sani, they were not thinking of Khattar, they were thinking of Modi, that Modi hame ye de raha. So this is if your government is delivering on the promises of all those tall promises, freebies, then that becomes a factor. That is a new reality of India's electoral scenario. In my limited understanding, this is like this, that they have learned the art of remaining in power by winning the election, by remaining in power. So remaining in power is the advantageous factor in a new India.
Right. Nilanjan, would you like to add something? I know you've written on this idea of politics of Vishwas, trust, and related to sort of the years under Modi. Any thoughts on?
See, look, Haryana is a very complicated case for the following reason. We know that it was deprioritized by the central government in terms of its engagement with the state, right? It's, whether or not Modi came 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, it certainly wasn't 20 or 25 times, right? So I think one of the more sort of complicated questions we have is that, yes, it is, politics of Vishwas has been a very standard strategy where the BJP is winning state elections on the name of Modi, directly campaigning on the name of Modi. This doesn't look like a campaign like that. In fact, when I was doing the scroll shows after this election, one of the panelists pointed out, right, this is the first time we're seeing the BJP state unit outperform the BJP national unit in a state. And it's sort of, not in a situation that we would have expected. And they said, many of the issues that voters had with the BJP were actually national in nature. So perhaps, deprioritizing Prime Minister Modi in this case helped. Now, in terms of this sort of question about, to what extent does the name of Modi help? To what extent does structured Modi help? Of course, there's a built-in Modi group, all across the country. this doesn't seem to be a case of that, for the very simple reason that, I said the vote shares were very different, but also the BJP wasn't running its campaign in that way. I think also when you talk to people in the BJP camp, they didn't expect to win, so now they have to figure out what story to make out of this. And I think part of the problem, the exit polls getting it wrong, including their internal polls, is that they actually also don't know exactly who they appeal to and why they appeal to them. And so it'll be an interesting thing to sort of see how the BJP figures out what it needs to do now that it's going to be formed.
I think Neelam wants to step in. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I did not cover Haryana as minutely as I covered Jammu and Kashmir, but till August I was covering Haryana and I do report on BJP. So one of the things that the BJP leader said, and which was also resonating on ground, was the fact that you should have the same government at the center and at the state, and they were citing Delhi as an example, the situation that prevails currently, where there's this constant fight between the center and the state. The developmental works are not getting done, whether it is about roads, whether it's about overall infrastructure. So for people of Haryana, I would not say that they were really happy with the work that the BJP had done to the extent that probably is being made out. But they were definitely concerned about the fact that if a BJP government is not at the state level, and let's say if it is a Congress government at the state, the kind of funding that generally a state gets, the kind of importance that Haryana right now gets because of BJP being at the center, is something that would definitely get impacted. And the Aam Aadmi Party government at Delhi served as a reminder of that. The fact that they are these neighboring states, and people from Haryana and Delhi, they are able to see, the kind of development that used to take place earlier, and the state that Delhi is in. I felt that was also one of the major factors, and I spoke to the BJP election in charge 6 months back, and they had admitted that BJP was in a difficult position. The same person, when I met in August, had said, no, the tide has changed, and he seemed confident that BJP could form the government. Of course, not the kind of majority that BJP has got, but they were saying that we will be able to form the government, we will be able to reach the majority point, and if need be, we could take help from the independents. So I believe that narrative about how development will come to a standstill if it is not a BJP government also played a major role in people deciding to whether change or to form an opinion at the last minute.
That's interesting. So maybe for the intervention of this question, I'll just move on to a point that Neelam made. The question of the independents and the smaller parties and the narrative around of them being seen as proxies for the BJP. So did that have much to do with the sort of, for example, the timing of, say, Engineer Rashid's release, or was that something that was already there on the ground? Yeah, Neelam, do you want to?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I thought you had asked for it.
Yeah.
So no, I would say that till at least June or July, the reaction that people had towards Engineer Rashid was completely different. Even when I started covering the elections, people were not that hostile towards Engineer Rashid or candidates, independent candidates per se. But when Jamaat came up with this list that we are backing these 10 candidates, these candidates are backed by Jamaat, this question was definitely being asked by people. Why is Jamaat deciding to contest election at this juncture? Who are these 10 candidates? What role are they going to play on their own? They will not be able to form the government. The NC is already critical of them. So who are they going to tie up with? This question was also posed to Engineer Rashid. I had also asked him this question that, in case there is a hung assembly, will you align with the BJP? And he said, no, I am quite confident of getting 30, 25 odd numbers. and I will seek support from others. And he did not specify that he will not align with the BJP. So this doubt was already sort of there in the people's mind, and the fact that engineer Rashid's bail got, he kept getting it. He kept getting. Hello.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I think we can hear you.
Yeah, the fact that, first he got the bail, and then at the same time, the date got extended twice already. The fact that people were asking him question about, he had earlier made this remark about that Kashmir should be free. People were asking him these same questions, and people were concerned about the fact that he is making those remarks. And as I pointed out earlier, still no action is being taken against him, whereas people were languishing in jail for the same odd reasons. So that was a question that was being asked by people. But at the same time, I maintain that at least on ground there was a buzz about engineer Rashid. People were talking about him. Who is this person? What he has done? Why his politics is different? And can he actually be a face as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned? But as I pointed out, towards the end, people were very clear that they wanted clear majority for a party. They did not want to give any scope to the BJP to be able to form an alliance with anyone, and which is why this entire consolidation took place in the favor of NC.
I know Nilanjan wants to step in, and then I'll go to Praveen too if he has any thoughts on this. Yeah, Nilanjan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just five. I mean, so I had a chance to speak to actually a defector from NC about this, and I remember his exact words were, as much as I hate to admit it, the state of play here and the fact that people want to prevent the BJP from forming government means that there are serious headwinds for Engineer Rashid and other independents if they're not able to very directly promise to join NC Alliance, right? Which is very difficult. So I think, just to sort of back up what Neelam said, right? I mean, I think sometimes what is complicated about analyzing an election in Jammu and Kashmir is that the center in and of itself is such an important actor, right? And trying to prevent the center from doing something or the BJP from doing something, which casts a pall on the PDP, for instance, right? Casts a pall on other independents, and I think it's something that ends up helping and hurting candidates from one election to the next in very, very complicated ways in that context.
Praveen, do you want to sort of step in and sort of the rationale or the logic behind so many of independents as well as the Jamaat feelings?
I don't think it's a secret that Delhi had this grand vision of inventing a new politics for a new Kashmir. It's been said in so many words. Right after the abrogation of Article 370, you had Altaf Bukhari, who's this very prominent businessman, controversial. All farmers call him Diethene Bukhari because his family has made this pesticide for many years. But Altaf Bukhari was propped up. Ghulam Nabi Azad started his own party. You had all sorts of characters who were promoted as the alternative new post-dynasty Kashmir. And this isn't new in Kashmir. The PDP, for its own part, was self-consciously supported by the central government. We know this from Amarjit Singh Dullat's book, the former RAW chief's book, as an alternative to the National Conference. And the idea was that all these one-time Islamist-leaning parties, including the Jamaat-e-Islami, would join the PDP. And if you like, the damage of the 1987 elections would be undone by this healing, inclusive venture. As I said earlier, in elections in the 1970s, Delhi, for various reasons, brought the Jamaat-e-Islami on board, brought other actors on board. And this has always been driven by this very exceptional urge to bring or lock secessionists into the Indian political system. Now, this is maybe a a politically sound urge, but it's one that's had very odd consequences because politicians then start looking to Delhi and to money from Delhi and incentives from Delhi for everything that they should do instead of concentrating on building their party systems. And that's ultimately meant parties in the state are fragile. Now, there's a lot of talk about corruption in Jammu and Kashmir. And you only have to see an election in Kashmir to realize that they're probably the most honest in the country. You will see no feeding of villagers. You will see no booze or drugs being handed out, even in Jammu. And it's because politicians are quite poor. And politicians are poor because their parties historically haven't mattered, haven't needed funding. There's no incentive to develop the kinds of systems we see elsewhere in the country. And like I said, I think it's high time now to let that polity begin evolving in whatever direction it does, rather than be so terrified of how people vote or will not vote. That Delhi is this sort of lurking hegemon constantly above everyone's head.
Sorry, Neelam, did you want to intervene or
No,
did you?
no,
Oh, that's
no,
your hand up from an earlier.
I
Okay.
understand.
Yeah. No, I think Nilanjan in the chat mode has mentioned something that did not come up in the early discussions, the question of delimitation, which was, I think, talked about a lot in the run-up to the elections. Nilanjan, did you want to talk about that, or did you want to throw out that issue for the other panelists?
So I can talk about it for 10 seconds and then throw it out to the panelists who know much more about it than I do. So I don't think it's any secret that there was a concerted effort to change the structure of political representation through delimitation of new constituencies. It's questionable whether it was legally valid because of how it was done. And when we look at the analysis, in fact, a few extra seats given to Jammu and Hindu-dominated areas did go to the BJP. But the other sort of intended masterstroke was that the LG, the Lieutenant Governor, would be able to nominate 5 seats. So effectively changing the magic number to 48. Now, it just so happens that the Congress and the NC combined got 49 seats, I believe, right? So, even with getting the extra seats and changing the magic number doesn't seem to have worked out. The interesting thing, which is a very complicated variable, so I think I would throw that out to the speakers, is that there were some ST reserved seats created, and there was an attempt to sort of generate a politics around that and win those seats. There are some complicated results there with independents and other parties winning, but suffice to say that all of these very complicated variables don't seem to have added up to getting the BJP past the magic number.
Right. Yeah, I think whether I'm sure Neelam and Praveen might have something to say about the delimitation.
So I think to the second one, I mean, this ST thing is quite fascinating because Jammu and Kashmir, unlike any other state in the union, the Kashmir region is over 70% general category. And, when Amit Shah came to Jammu and said, we have created ST, more reservation for STs, and we have done this and we have done that. I suspect, though I have no metrics for this, that among a lot of people in Kashmir, this actually backfired quite badly because people, this whole sort of politics of reservation, again, works very differently in that state to elsewhere in the country. Even in the Jammu region, this sort of reservation of given to Pahadis as a linguistic community, which is itself very complicated, dubious business, succeeded in consolidating the Gujjar Bakarwal vote behind the national conference, which might well otherwise have gone elsewhere. On delimitation, yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, and I wonder how this 5 seats business, these 5 nominations, will eventually go. There was a test case from Pondicherry last year where the Supreme Court said the lieutenant governor had the authority to nominate anyone she wanted. But Jammu and Kashmir's political government now is insisting that these 5 nominations should in fact take place with the consultation of the government, and clearly there will be litigation around it. I personally think it's a very dangerous thing for Indian democracy if nominations are going to, voting members are going to, allowed to be nominated in this way. So there will probably be litigation, and this will be a interesting issue to watch.
Right. Neelam, did you want to step in or?
Yeah, no, just a passing remark that I wanted to make was that, even in Lok Sabha, if you realize that they did not field any candidates in in Kashmir. And one of the reasons was that, probably they felt that they did not want to have sort of an embarrassment ahead of the assembly poll. So obviously, the kind of division that has taken place, the calculation that the BJP had in mind, of course, it did not work out for them the way they wanted. But despite that, even if you look at certain constituency in the valley in Kashmir also, their vote share has increased. BJP's vote share has increased. So even if you look at, for instance, their best performance, for instance, in the valley has come from Gurez, where their candidate has lost by a slim margin of over 1,000 votes. So obviously, as Praveen has been saying, this is much more complex than winning or losing. But what the BJP has, or the BJP government has in mind for the union territory, and now I believe the focus will obviously shift on the statehood issue. And so far, if you look at the entire approach that Omar Abdullah has, it's more of a conciliatory. He said that there is no bitterness towards PM Modi because he really wants to govern the state this time round. So we will have to wait to see how things will pan out.
Right. And since we've been talking about delimitation, Jammu getting more seats in the delimitation process. On the question of statehood, which Neelam just mentioned, are the sentiments similar, so strongly in favor of statehood both in Jammu and Kashmir, or is there a divide there, or how does that sort of work out? Either Praveen or Neelam.
So I focused mostly on Kashmir, so I had not reported from Jammu region. But as far as obviously the valley is concerned, Kashmir is concerned, people are quite clear about statehood. I mean, they're not only emotional about it; they feel it is their right, and which is why Omar Abdullah, from day one, even before he was designated as the CM, he was talking about the fact that the first resolution that they will bring would be about statehood. But as far as speaking to, I mean, generally, political parties and all is concerned, people from Jammu also, it felt, they would want statehood to be sort of, to be given back to them. So, but Praveen would be able to shed more light.
No, I totally agree with you, Neelam. I think in Jammu also there's a great push for statehood, and people feel that central rule hasn't given them the kind of influence. There are complaints about arrogant bureaucrats. There are complaints about people not being able to get very routine kind of administrative things done. There's in fact the larger question. One of the things the government of India did in these years is dismantle the Jammu and Kashmir cadre and incorporate its IS and IPS into the Agmut cadre. There's a lot of irritation around that because there's a lot of civil servants now floating in and out who don't necessarily have a career commitment to that state. So I think people would like to see change on these issues. The problem in Jammu always becomes on what terms do you want that change to happen? You want the same things that Kashmiris do, but you don't necessarily want what will necessarily be a Kashmiri-dominated system. It's compounded by the fact that I think the Congress is also going through a generational churning. So every one of the big names in the party are now people in their 70s and 80s. There isn't really a younger sort of leadership there. And I wonder what will happen to that in the long term. Because I can't see the kernels of any sort of new party or leadership in Jammu coming up in a hurry. So maybe it'll come from somewhere unexpected. But certainly Ghulam Nabi Azad's experiment went absolutely nowhere. The Panthers party, many of these old sort of Jammu parties are all in decline. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that region over time.
Right. And you were, Praveen, in your brief comments, you were also hopeful that there'll be, the politics of confrontation will be replaced by some sort of collaboration. So, but so long as it remains union territory, I think it's almost seems inescapable that, the LG, going by other examples, it's going to be a sort of confrontation approach that seems to have been, taken, not just by LG, of course, we've seen governors in other states
Do
playing
the
the role
same
of the
thing.
opposition.
No, and I think Nilanjan made a very important point that, look, at the end of the day, if you add in these 5 nominated members, there's a majority of 1. And 1 is a very tempting number to play with. Moving one legislator one way or the other is hardly beyond the talents of the Home Minister, which we've seen in many other places played out. So, I mean, will Delhi be able to resist that temptation? I don't know, but I certainly hope so. But as you say, the template is not an encouraging one.
Right, and then suddenly the with the nominated members, hypothetically, the majority does not, as you're saying, is not a comfortable one anymore. It's yeah razor thin. I think we are sort of running out of time. Do any of you have anything sort of pressing to sort of mention or ask of each other? If not, Nilanjan, I had one quick question to maybe sort of end, because exit polls occupy so much of our kind of, mind space, unfortunately, during election time. You talked about, better sampling without sort of getting too technical. What does that exactly entail, and how? I'm kind of starting off with the baseline that the exit polls are not intentionally biased.
Gotcha.
Some of them might be, but they're sort of getting it wrong for statistical reasons. So what would you kind of advise? What's your as a mathematician and statistician?
So look, I mean, the methods being used by the exit pollsters today are like 60, 70-year-old methods, right? If you look at the techniques that are being used overseas, it is an area of active research. The most obvious place, that's why I gave this categorization of responsive, hesitant, and non-responsive voters, is that basically the math comes down to a simple problem. You are undersampling hesitant voters, okay? And as there are more political consultants, more money in elections, more media, for those of us who've been doing field work for decades, you see that even in places where nobody used to be able to get to, there's surveyors getting there, somebody's getting a call. So you are creating a larger mass of hesitant people. Who am I talking to? Who is this person connected to? Why should I give this person my opinion? Right? So hesitation doesn't mean that the person won't respond, but it means that you have to make sure that you go out and figure out who might be more hesitant and work to speak to those populations. So as you know, some of us who called UP right in 2024, that was exactly why we called it right and the exit polls didn't, right? Which was that an exit pollster, some 25-year-old kid running around desperately trying to get a bunch, is not going to reach hesitant voters, right? So there are sampling techniques that one can use. Basically, it falls down to a very simple idea, which is that there are going to be certain places where people are more hesitant. You have to make sure to continue to resample in those areas. Even if you get less of a yield, you need to speak to people in those areas and weight that population up. If you're not giving an incentive for your surveyors to do that, then you're going to get consistently biased estimates.
Right. Okay. On that note, if no one else has anything to say, we are absolutely out of time. So we are a minute to 4:30 local time in Singapore. So thanks to all of you for taking part in this very rich contribution. Thanks for members of the audience who are still around. Ashutosh, unfortunately, has had to leave for another meeting. So, so a virtual round of applause for the panelists. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Bye.